Hello! I have been sent to replay. I have performed the ritual sacrifice. We are here today hand in hand to check out Keyan versus Pr0nogo on Terminus. There's a lot of things going on. Ooh, look at this. There's a lot of things going on in my background at this moment, so hopefully I'll not be interrupted. I'm doing it now because it's still the most convenient. So, Terminus, we did discuss this map before, no point getting too much into it. I did just wake up, and I was sent some updated files to check out with this, as it is a more recent version, and we have a mineral and resource counter on the top. So before it was, I believe if you clicked on them, you could see their resources. Now you can actually see right there the resources. So I think it would be kind of nice to have the names there, but then it might get kind of crowded too. So yeah, obviously Starcraft 2, the drop-down interface was really awkward to use. And in such a small resolution as Brood War, the real estate for the screen is quite in high demand, right? So the drone is burrowed. At this stage, it is possible to unburrow them you can walk next to them and they will show up, and then you can attack them and force them out, as opposed to having to always build a structure on them, which, especially early on, is kind of disruptive to your economy to be having to build and cancel structures and using your workers and stuff like that. So, drone's still very, very good at scouting. A little bit of harass here. Always try to get a little bit of harass in, because you never know, you might score a kill or two. And more importantly, you can really tie up their attention. Of course, you don't want to be with your attention either, because tilted keyboard thunder. And yeah, you don't want to commit too much to that, but then it's easy to lose your worker on top of it. So it really depends. If you really want to keep eyes, if they're trying to delay their tech until your worker is gone, you don't want to lose the worker, but also, especially with like Zerg, you want to know if they're going to build a second resource or a second tech structure like a Quasrock after, or if they're going to expand or whatever. So in some cases with like Terran, you don't need to worry as much, right? Like if they build a Fulcrum first, they might eventually build a barracks, but it's not really super relevant in the next couple of minutes. Speaking of building things, there's a bunker coming down over here. So that's going to be... Oh, there's a Skither core, though. So that will... Not really the strongest of units with only 8 damage, but... Vulture can't kill them, so... It's... doesn't really get anything insanely timed. Lag Spiek. My ace in the hole. I guess he's learned from me, where if you start losing, just phone up Trudeau and say, hey, can you do the whole Canada thing? And then he just starts wiggling around in his office chair and the internet dies. So Skithergors can chase a little bit better than Nathercors, not being melee and being a little bit faster. He does get the Goliath kill, but one worker. Not too bad, not too bad. 250 minerals worth of kills. Is that fairly effective? There is a bunker with a mason in it. There's no vulture, nothing in there that's actually dangerous. It's looks like Keyan is trying to make sure that it can't land by keeping a drone underneath of it. Very, very wary that there might be something in it, but he chooses to go away. It's probably pretty obvious that the bunker was not really looking for a place to go. That wasn't really going to be an issue for him, but he might still think there's something in it. So he gathered up some areas to go over there and squish it. There is still a mine here. Mines do, in fact, target workers now, I believe. So that's both a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing in sense you can use a worker to scout out the mine ahead of your military units if they're more expensive. But it's bad in the sense that now vultures are a lot better at denying expansions and scouting than they were originally. Oh, and they can do this. Oh my god. Oh my god, it's an absolute massacre. However, the Cyclops dies for basically nothing. I'm not sure what his point being there was. Maybe Pr0nogo is just kind of hoping that he had, maybe his units were misplaced or something. He could grab a couple of extra worker kills off of it, but That said, Pr0nogo is not really that far ahead in terms of his actual base right now. He's still on the one base with the one fulcrum building units with it, and he's quite invested at this stage. Having lost that Goliath does kind of set him behind a little bit. And if Keyan is able to secure this expansion, it's going to put him in a good spot, even though he's lost quite a number of units. His worker count is quite weak right now. But he does have some money banked up he can use. Pr0nogo also has some money banked up he can use. But he might be looking to... I thought he was going to actually cap and go for tech. But I think he's seeing that there's so many air units running around and there's some Zethacores here. Perhaps he spotted if here as well. And maybe that Keyan's just going to be looking for a timing push at this stage because my harass is kind of slowing down and he is just... Oh! Yeah, that tickles. That spooked Keyan. Keyan decides I'm gonna hang back now. I don't know if he was just like probing out and scouting and seeing if anything was out in front, or if he actually really did intend to attack. Whatever it was, it stopped dead in its tracks. So Pr0nogo is all hunkered up now with his Goliaths and the bunkers. Some units have acceleration, some don't. Who is Project Araya? Probably... I have no idea. Some observer, I guess. So, yeah, the acceleration is really... It's kind of derpy in Brood War. There is some logic behind it, but the kind of logic brewed in the back of the janitor's closet with... 2 foreign exchange students who only speak Chinese, and 1 Malaysian guy with a bong as big as his arm. Keyan has restored his worker count. He's just about on par with Pr0nogo, but that's on 2 bases, so it's probably going to accelerate a little bit more. Still probing around here, checking to see if Pr0nogo has built any expansions, and Anseal is out. Pr0nogo is still very, very, very much strapped into the 1 base right now. Very, very strapped to 1 base. Not really able to find the courage to move out with all those Zethacores and everything slurping around the map. He doesn't really have the military units to hold out on his own. And at the same time, he doesn't really want to move out his bunkers. So he is kind of just stuck in here right now. And there's no geyser capping or anything going on at all. It kind of looks like he cuckoed his gas ever so slightly here. As a result, Keyan is like, well, I don't really want to try to brave those defenses and lose everything, especially since my eco is still kind of hurting and some drones are chilling. May as well just take some more expansions and just take map presence. That's really the idea. It's a safe road to go. You can't really go wrong with it. You'll just continue to put distance between yourself and your opponent so long as you do not allow them to take expansions or otherwise. However, Keyan does not keep units within Pr0nogo's side of the map, so Pr0nogo could, for example, expand or send out more bunkers or a dropship, perhaps, and Keyan may not spot it. So having a constant awareness is definitely a part of that, and he is checking the left side of the map and coming down again, but the Trojan is going on the right side, and a Wraith is coming up the center. Wraiths have been buffed ever so slightly. I think they have more health and maybe are a little cheaper now. I'm not sure if their damage was changed very much. It's still only 10, so maybe it was less before. Maybe it was like 8 or something. I wasn't really familiar with their numbers. So Keyan kind of like looking here for some picks. But a lot of damage from the Cyprians and those bunkers too. So a lot of damage came down. 2 vultures are here. Oh, only 1 drone off of that. Keyan is kind of floundering a little bit here. That mine accomplishes nothing. This vulture is first to run away. Keyan absolutely refuses to build circuits in his base. There's been a couple of attempts on his workers now, and he is just not really wanting to build any static defense to try to, for one, give his response a little bit more oomph to it. 2, prevent things like this from happening. Oof. So even though Keyan has that 3rd up, it does get neutered a little bit. Castrated, even. The rabbi came over, gave one look at him and said, no, we're going all the way. You know, this Wraith is just scouting, not being used for harass. It's kind of a long-about way to get a witness. It's a lot faster. But he could harass with that if he wants to. There is Hydras here and there in the worker lines. So it won't really accomplish too much. Their damage is not that high. But there is no detection, so it's just continually peeping up Keyan's skirt, seeing what kind of armaments he is carrying and knowing where to drop more vultures. The vultures are quite dangerous now due to their updates, and a number of them can most certainly snipe some Hydras. If he's not careful, he's going to mine himself. No! A lot like that. That's really actually a great way to demonstrate the splash changes to the mines, however. It's the fall off is a little bit more tight, so Pr0nogo getting in a lot of harass, keeping Keyan from really just getting too out of control with his expansions, but still, Keyan's at a stage where he's just floating a ton of money, so he can just replace those workers if he wants to. Pr0nogo still has to look towards expanding and future-proofing himself, because the Observer confirming the mine changes. I think Keyan may have spotted that Wraith at this point. And yep, there comes the Ovolith. The Wraith probably actually reminded him about that burrowed drone, as he was probably tracking its movements somewhat. He's going to follow it, although he can't do anything about it. The Wraith will, as a result, spot this expansion. No, it stopped too early. I don't think Pr0nogo knows it exists. Pr0nogo at this point, now seeing that Keyan is quite locked down and still building drillets without building any static defense. Or really too much at this point. Oh, it died. The stream of information comes to an end. The information age is over. The Hogwarts legacy age has begun. But that's not going to stop Pr0nogo from dropping. he's upped his antics now. He's got two of them. One of them with Goliaths and Cyprians. So that's going to be quite an attack, actually. Pr0nogo keeping his money down. Of course, he doesn't have much to begin with. Got that command center just about finished. Keyan has not really, he's starting to cap this geyser, but he's not building any static defense. He might even be trying to save for tech. I'm not really sure what Keyan's goal plan at this point is. And this drop is just going to really fluster him, because he's going to have to commit pretty much everything he's got to this. Some good mines here could really cause him a lot of headaches. But Pr0nogo didn't preemptively try to mine this. Now he is, though. Keyan not quite on the trigger to stop that from happening, so Pr0nogo is not really punished for not really taking the initiative in that case. Keyan's bringing over his detection. This Hatrosk will die. There is another Hatrosk here that got scouted and is being killed. Pr0nogo taking a minute to perhaps police the rest of the map. That allows Keyan to take out those two mines. And the first real battle is going to begin. But Keyan has brought over all of his units and assembled, and these missiles are spinning. Got in a couple kills, able to single out that Skithrakora with the last shot there. That hurts. That's 100 minerals and some gas. Keyan has lots of minerals and some gas lying around, and maybe entirely unsure how to handle this. I think that the aggression has really put him off kilter, and he's kind of thinking, okay, I just want to tech at this point. So he's going to start capping these. Again, still no static defense or anything to guard these expansions from the vultures, leaving them perpetually open, and Pr0nogo seems very much inclined to just continue that. Indeed, these are already filling up. He's just pumping out factory units and Cyprians and getting those ready to just keep the pressure up as he begins his expansion. Looks like Pr0nogo's banking here. This is ultimately very intentional. Probably going to be picking up the Atlas at some point in the future. Keyan is I have to stop this nonsense somehow. He's probably taking an expansion. He's going to send down his air units, and in all likelihood, this expansion is going to get fucked, and the Atlas is going to get denied. The Pr0nogo doesn't want that to be cancelled. It is quarter-way finish. Time does matter. Oh, 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 and he barely saves it. Bravely not cancelling it, getting another vulture up here. There is some circus colonies coming up. Oh, 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 oh. Rebuild this expansion. Got a lot of money. Keyan is very, very rich. Very, very, very rich. And now he finally has 600 gas. If it is the tier 2 structure that he is after, which it is, he now can build it. But the next drop is on the way. Something did explode. I think he may have canceled the structure or something. This expansion, having just been built, is going to be knocked down. Keyan not really in possession of a lot of military units, but enough to squash this attack for sure. That is quite a costly attack for Pr0nogo to perform. The Goliaths, of course, very expensive. And the Blackjacks and everything like that. He definitely lost a lot more in terms of resources for the attack than Keyan did. But the 300 cost Hatch Rusk plus the potential mining time just perpetually keeps him behind. He's got a lot of money. He can replace it whenever he wants. But it's really, really, really tying him up. He's always one step behind in dealing with these drops. And it just seems like he's not entirely... Like, this is the position I find myself in Wizard, where it's like, what do I exactly do at this point? Well, once you hit tier 2, there's a few options available to you. You can go straight to Bactylisks, for example. Pr0nogo scouts this. There's actually nothing inside that Trojan. He does notice some idle workers. This is being rebuilt. And this is going to die. So a curious choice to use his transports to scout. I believe, yeah, that's going to be a tech switch. I think he would have only done that if he had not really valued them anymore. Obviously, if he wanted to keep dropping, having nothing in them, it just consumes more of his time. So we're going to be seeing tier 2 air. So in the not so distant past, I played a whole bunch of 1 versus 1s with Pr0nogo. I don't know, probably like 30 of them, maybe 40. And just about every single one of them was an entirely one-sided loss on my behalf. But eventually I figured out that I could do an early Panoptis switch out of Dracoden and Protoss, and then that would just allow me to dominate the map. And I would play very, very, like, economically and control-wise. Starve the map, tech up, you know, make sure it can never expand. And this would consistently win. And part of the sort of issues that this exposed is that the tier 2 Terran Air is quite difficult to get to because he needed the Fountainhead. And I think that is now different because evidently he doesn't have a Fountainhead. But also, the units themselves were not really terribly strong. I think it's as a result of the tech changes that occurred a while ago, where Gorgons in particular used to be like a tier 1 units. And they got pushed to tier 2, but then tier 2 became very prohibitively expensive, and then I think it was tier 2.5, actually, that they were originally required until now. And their power budget really did not match the cost of investment. So now you can get them a little more early, so Terran has more air presence, and statistically they may be a little bit stronger. So I haven't played with them, I don't really know too much of them, but I know he was working on that. So Terran now can enter tier 2 era without requiring the Fountainhead, and I know Valkyries, when I saw their stats, they got a massive buff. I don't know if they needed a massive buff because I haven't really used them, but they are still anti-air exclusive units, and these guys are going to get massacred by the circuits if they stay in them, but there's a hole here. You always got to be wary about this. Everyone's always going to go behind onto the cliffs. You got to put your air defense there. No! Damn it, Freeman. So there's the Gorgons. I think they're a little bit more tanky now. I'm not sure. I think they got a slight boost. But now they're more available early again, right? So it's it kind of puts a Terran more in line where the Zerg can get enhanced there at tier 2. The Protoss don't have tiers, you know. Oh. Here come the anti-air, but they're flying into the circuit colony, so it's not the best of trades. That was a lot of damage. Yeah, that was... Yeah, Valkyries are pretty tough now. So, gonna want something other than Skithogors to deal with those. Calculisks with their armor pen. Someone had said that Calculists were not doing 4 damage, that they were doing 3 damage. So, I'm not sure if that was actually the case or not, or if it got fixed if it was the case. I don't honestly keep track of the changes to this because there's too many changes and I got too much going on. But if they did get... fixed, if there was an issue, then they actually would be quite a bit stronger than they were before, which Calculus are kind of a mixed bag, I feel, because they're really squishy. And here we go back to what we've seen in the previous cast, where there's going to be some dropping of siege tanks. Just 1 siege tank, though. I'm always kind of curious about Pr0nogo's mindset behind doing this, because 1 siege tank is not going to down this base, and it requires quite a bit of attention to micro it. I would figure he might be like trying to bait out air units with this siege tank, it looks like. But since it's just Quasilisks that are tickling him to death, he decides to bring out his air units anyways, kind of showing his hand here. It's almost so non-threatening you don't really want to humor it. You don't really want to bring over your entire attack force. But then he's just going to keep bringing in units, right? So Keyan kind of has to meet this, even if he doesn't really want to. Pr0nogo is taking a lot of damage from this Wraith colony here. They're a little bit more menacing than they used to be offensively. Keyan's still not coming in to deal with this, even though it's clear there's a lot of Gorgons over here that are causing him headaches too. I'm not entirely sure what Keyan in this entire game has been kind of like, maybe a little bewildered by the aggressive drops. It's really been like just constantly putting him off key over and over and over again. Off Keyan, so to say. And it seems like he's just going to sacrifice this expansion entirely, taking the one south of here and not bothering to cross the map. I'm really curious why he did not commit his air units to that. The Gorgons are all very heavily wounded, and while there are 2 Valkyries, he could have just hung out above the Wraith colony, sniped the tank, and called it a day. Pr0nogo continues to take hundreds and hundreds of damage from this Wraith colony unnecessarily. And that apparently was the signal to Keyan to unclog the arteries and stampede towards Pr0nogo's base. Absolutely flustered and enraged by the constant tickling. He doesn't have a tickle fetish. Maybe he wishes he did. Or maybe he's going to camp the middle. Is he not going to attack? He doesn't have any eyes on Pr0nogo's base. He doesn't really know what he's walking into. He knows it could be tanks. He techs again. You know, it could just be that Keyan is intentionally being as unaggressive as possible, although defending his expansions would really help with the teching. And really just investing into tech. And I'm not really sure. He has some kind of plan. Okay, never mind. He's coming now. It's coming. There is a lot of Calculisks. The tank melts. There's another tank and a couple of Madrigals. The Madrigals can absolutely butcher him if he's not careful. There are a lot of Basilisks. Pr0nogo is going to be in trouble. Meanwhile, Pr0nogo has all these wounded units over here. May as well keep them over there. Probably going to poke that expansion if he gets the time to navigate over there. There's obviously a lot of shit in his base, but the tank got a lot of kills in. Holy shit. And there we are, repairing the bunker desperately. Backlists are great for that because their bouncing attack will kill the SCVs, but they were focused on the other bunker for a while. Pr0nogo splits up his units so the Cyprian doesn't take any splash. And the attack is finally dealt with. Pr0nogo lost bunkers, units, and turrets, and pretty much all of his workers in this main. But at the end of the day, I feel like he kind of came out on top of that because it took so long for Keyan to attack, And it really wasn't a decisive attack. However, Keyan at this stage does have a higher tech. And I'm not entirely sure where he's going to go with it, but at this stage, you might see him flip a switch and decide to become much more aggressive in general. He does, however, have to stop the continued bleeding of his expansions. He has the power to do so, but he's not doing so at this moment. Oh, there we are. Now he's coming. This expansion is starting to mine now. These two Valkyries have a lot of work cut out. They just melted. Yeah, they did quite a bit of damage, to be fair, for just two of them. The Calculus only got 85 health. And the Valkyries were perhaps able to get in a couple of extra shots, like if the Gorgons were able to draw them away from the Valkyries for a few seconds, you probably would have seen a lot of Calculus die. However, finally the attack is dealt with, and Keyan decides to start expanding to the mid, and will just continue to grow. And the board once more kind of resets and has cooled off a little bit. The last of Pr0nogo's drops have been destroyed. He does have a fountainhead, and Keyan is once more able to start taking more of the map relatively uncontested. And this expansion is going to die next. Here comes some Sun Dogs. They're basically tier 2 wraiths. They don't really have the range to hit and run the Calculus. Maybe he was hoping to spook him. Well, Keyan does not get spooked. Down goes one Trojan. The Sentinels are going to pose a threat to him if they dive too deep into them. As well as the Magicals are very strong against Calculus, and decides to back off before he loses everything. So he did build the Irulent Evoa. I'm not entirely sure what that unlocks. I think it's tier 2.5. Keyan has an absolutely disgusting amount of minerals and basically no gas. That's how things turn out in this. That's undoubtedly the reason why he's going there, because he really wants the gas from the middle. Kind of surprised he didn't take the other one yet. Maybe he figures there might be a mine or something over here. Captaincy coming up. Machine shops being rebuilt. Pr0nogo's money is... His minerals is quite low, but my god, is he in an absolutely disgusting amount of gas. He could just bank up to tier 3 if he really felt super confident. But given that Keyan's starting to be a little bit more aggressive, he might be figuring that Keyan's frustrations are mounting and he's perhaps has just been teching all this time. And that would be a very correct assumption because the Spire being built, a lot of these structures have been upgraded. Keyan maybe banking for very, very specific things and just holding out to those specific things like a Terran might turtle for tanks. There's some tickles, but I don't think Keyan is actually aware what was going on there. More tickles. Tickle? But his detector is right there. Yeah, Sundogs are extremely good at killing Worker Alliance. Oh! Ooh. How was he detected, though? Maybe he, like, attacked or something accidentally, and it got instantly killed. I don't see detection here. Keyan's next army has come down, but he is trying to deal these madrigals with his ground units before his Calculus get melted. Some salamanders here. The Calculus do melt. Oof. Well, that was a pretty good trade for Pr0nogo. He definitely came out on top of that. Absolutely. Slows down any stack of salamanders he wanted because he did lose one, but Keyan's attack investment was a lot higher and stood to deal a tremendous amount of damage. For example, if that attack had gone down here and ignored his main entirely, he could have probably killed the Fountainhead, and that would have really hurt a lot in Pr0nogo's economic situation. He at this stage is obviously transitioning away from being very passively allowing his expansions to die, and is just trying to focus more on being aggressive at this stage. So now we see some protathalors. Potatoes. We're going to see some potatoes. These guys, I believe, are long ranged. Yes, 10 range. So they're kind of... to me, they feel just more like Hydras, right? Just high-range Hydras. They're pretty good all-around units. However, they can only attack ground. So, against the Salamanders and other... yeah. Probably not going to do too well. Keyan has so much money, he could just go straight to tier 3 if he really wanted to. He could cap a couple of extra geysers, bank a little bit more. Pr0nogo, ignoring the middle consistently here, has allowed Keyan to continually build here. And this is getting well saturated, and if he had taken that second expansion, he would have been mining from there too, uncontested this entire time. The Salamanders can attack air and can attack ground. They're reasonably beefy, and their damage has been increased substantially in a recent patch. This is actually very likely to be a very dangerous attack. They leave behind fire on the ground that, when it stacks up, is very lethal. I don't know if that actually stacks, to be fair with you. I'm actually going to say I'm not entirely sure. I think it does, but... never mind. They got annihilated. It's alright though. A stray one has found the Keyan's central expansion and is murdering all of his gas production. If he did have his eyes on tier 3, it's going to be a lot harder now. This is actually ally save splash. So it may not look like it, by the conventions of Brood War. You can actually just walk through it with your units. That makes these units pretty good against killing, like say for example, you've got a bunch of tanks being swarmed by Zethicors. The Salamanders can just make a wall of death surrounding them. So he chooses not to kill the Hatrosk, perhaps expecting impending defenses, but actually Keyan is not sending impending defenses. However, indeed it was tier 3 that he was saving for, and tier 3 he goes to. Pr0nogo's intent to tickle him to death has not really mounted good results, and that Salamander investment was quite major to lose so easily. The one in the middle, I feel like it accomplished more overall, especially since it's still alive. But the group of them dying really sets him back a lot. So we do have some Mutalisks up. I honestly don't feel like they're really that strong, but their ability may be a little stronger than I'm giving it credit for. I haven't really seen them succeed too much. They're still fairly expensive, and they're quite late in the tech. There is a Pr0nogo coming. If I was to guess, that's going to be where we're going to see the Queen replacements and potentially one or two other units related to spawning broodlings and no such things. Of course, as we saw in the Toaster game with Shambler and Keyan, those units are actually really strong. But I had always figured that they probably wouldn't be as strong against Terran because of things like the magical tanks, Salamander, just the abundance of AoE and multi-target options available to them. So this could really make a mess for Pr0nogo if he's not really aware of it coming, and he hasn't really been scouting anymore after that point. He kind of like used his Trojans to scout. They died or got forced away, and then that was kind of like, yeah, we're not really seeing him penetrating into the base. He has to know that that's what Keyan's doing, though. Keyan's been way too passive to really be like investing heavily into army at this point, and he's not taking those side expansions anymore. He's just been very, 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 very content to chill out. So we're seeing a couple of units here that I have not really seen too much. We have the Dilettante, or the Dante from the God of War series, has 6 armor penetration. So this infantry, very, very good at dealing with high armor units. I have the Silver Tongue with 10 armor penetration. That actually may be some of the highest armor penetration I've ever seen. They also have decent range and a hell of a lot of health. So these are, I believe, to be tier 3. Yes, they're tier 3 infantry. This expansion is finally erased, though it seemed like Keyan had basically abandoned it at this point. With a stack of Salamanders, we are starting to see the very same army that Shambler was building. And indeed, it may have been Shambler that inspired Keyan to build in this manner. Remember, Shambler also had to be somewhat passive in that game at that point because tier 3 Berserk is just so expensive. If you commit to army really at any point on so few bases, you're just not going to make it. Because it's what, like 1800 gas or something for the one structure? But now that he's at that stage, if Pr0nogo's not careful, this Air Force is just going to get swarmed by broodlings. And it's really going to come down to his control. But he absolutely has the tools to fight that. And Keyan's not really quite at the stage where he has a really, really high density army that can spawn. This is busted. A high density amount of spawns yet. So the Spraith colonies do a reasonable amount of damage. So he's going to take some free damage from this, but he's just opening up the way. Maybe hoping to draw Keyan out. There's a Talos that is the advanced worker for the Terran. Don't be shocked if he tries to build something like turrets or ion cannons over here. Going for a proxy. If he's able to build ion cannons over here, he doesn't have to attack anymore. He can just turtle behind them. And at that point, oh my god. Alright, so this is precisely what Pr0nogo wants to do, is to spawn them, back off, and then come back and kill them with all your cooldowns up. These units here are almost entirely anti-ground, the surface units for Keyan. They're not going to offer really anything in this at all. And Pr0nogo stands to kill all of them with basic impunity here. His air units are not defending them, they're just getting murdered. Oh my god. Yeah, I'm not sure if that fire stacks. I think it would be kind of insane if it did. Oh my god. Oh, it's a massacre. That went about as bad for Keyan as it could have, really. He just didn't have the real options to deal with those air units, and all of his ground units are just getting slaughtered wholesale. He's sending a few of them over to here, but there's just only a handful of them. Absolutely not the critical mass of brood spawn. He really needed to overwhelm those defenses. Pr0nogo taking the time to clean those up so they don't threaten him. Keyan building some Vithrilisks, I believe they're called. They're a replacement for the Devourers. I know those well because the AI would always spam like 30,000 of them regardless of what was going on the map. It was it was their thing. And this, yeah, there is an ion cannon being built there. I don't think he notices that. He must notice the Sentinel attacking. He's just going to draw his attention right over there. He's not doing anything about it. If these start finishing, it's going to be just an absolute mess for him. Oh, that was... He didn't need to do that. Oh, no. There it comes. Nothing happened. Okay, there we go. Oh, that's a lot of damage. And then just mops them up. That's it. Oh my god, the AoE. Anything that goes into this is just going to get massacred except for the most beefiest of units. Wow, looks like they're not even doing damage. It was basically losing no health. I didn't think the Talos could out-repair that many units. So I think what Keyan wanted to deal with this is the Gaz Rithlicors or whatever they are, the Guardians. Because of their long range, you force the air units to come to you. And their base damage turns absolutely insane at a long range. And then he could have had, you know, the rest of whatever he had. The Vithrilisks, like, for example, to guard them. So these guys are all pretty short range. So those units would really be able to abuse them. And you had to have done that before the ion cannons came up. That sound is very loud when they're stacked. Holy shit. Yeah, so this is quite viable because of the flying workers. I mean, you could use a ground worker too, but the flying workers actually increase build speed. So the walking animation is kind of interesting. At this stage, it's just a matter of wiping Keyan off the map. Just trying to slap Pr0nogo's ass as much as he can before the bitter end. I still don't know what the Pr0nogo does. Maybe that's what makes Taloses. I can never figure out where they come from. All right, so that was kind of an interesting game. It really, like, to me, it was just like a death by 1,000 tickles. Right, Keyan, in many cases when he was being attacked and his expansions were being destroyed, had the power to intervene and chose not to intervene. Many times it felt like he just either was not really giving a shit about what was going on or deemed it an acceptable loss. And those added up time after time after time after time, continually delaying his gas income and keeping him from really being able to take advantage of the fact that Pr0nogo just didn't really have map presence. He had just tiny little squads of units that were just running around, continually circumcising Keyan's ability to take extra expansions. And if his goal was to hit tier 3 and then do a single massive attack, that was continually delayed. If that was the goal, then the Bactalisk attack was probably out of frustration more than anything else, and it did also come kind of late. You had all these units that really were not doing too much until at that stage, and then when the attack came, he allowed his unit control to get sloppy, and the one bunker with repairing was not punished. The Bactalisk would have just massacred all those SCVs if he just selected some targets for them. And, I mean, even then the attack probably would have still eventually fallen, but it would have done a little bit more damage if his units didn't get separated and were attacking different things. He could have also just moved his units away and then focused on the northern bunker that did eventually go down, and stayed away from the other one that was being repaired, forcing Pr0nogo to respond to him, bring his SCVs more out to the open, deal with them. So it's more like there's like this little trickle things. Many rocks make an avalanche, right? Many river drops make a river. And that's really what happened here. There was also the fact that Pr0nogo was showing that he was taking a lot of air at that stage, but Keyan eventually decided to invest very heavily into an anti-surface army. And again, I think the brood spawn was a great idea. Shambler has shown that it can absolutely work, but there is a few things to consider. First of all, Terran have way more ranged units, and Pr0nogo's build was all ranged in AoE, so you're already at a natural disadvantage for that. I still think it could have worked. You just had to actually get your units into the position where the broods spawn, and then force those units to attack the brood spawn instead of something that you're really trying to protect, which I guess, again, the Gezrith Lithricors, whatever they are, the Guardians, that would have been like the perfect unit for this because they probably have like double the range of the Salamanders, if not more. Their base damage is really high. They are very immobile, so you do have to kind of like work around them where they are just this slow moving wall of death. And then you have your units that protect them just kind of skirting around, waiting for things like Valkyries to get into them and then kill the Valkyries, right? Like the Vithralisks was the perfect idea. It was pretty obvious they were going to work if Pr0nogo stood and fought. He didn't have to stand and fight. He waited for the ion cannon to fire a shot at them, get them really low, then they were all clustered up, and then all of his AoE just immediately murdered them. So Keyan choosing to chase them at that point was like, yeah, they were just chasing and not doing anything. It was, almost like to me like an admission that it was going to be over. You can really just tell by looking at the units kind of what happens here. Like Pr0nogo just did not make many units. He didn't really, I mean, obviously Zerg and Larva and Brood Spawn and so on. But then you look at the actual kills on top of it and the losses on top of it. It's like Pr0nogo lost like half of what he built it was a really rough game for Pr0nogo because he was always so low on economy the entire time, which should have allowed Keyan to just take over the entire map uncontested. And a lot of the map, it really was uncontested, but the saturation came kind of slow. Then the expansions weren't really defended at the point it really would have made a difference. It was like a series of timing failures that continually delayed his ability to get tier 2, tier 2.5, tier 3. And it felt like he was really trying to hold out on those, but he was just continually being exploited because of his lethargic nature of actually trying to strike for that goal. Where it was like, I'm going to build tech, and I'm going to have these units, but then it's like you have to actually control the map to fasten those. And in many cases, especially early in the game, it wasn't just like, oh, I'm behind on gas, so I'm being punished for that. It was more like he wasn't building defenses with the excess minerals he did have to at least discourage or make Pr0nogo have to devote harder to those drops. And then the loss of the left side expansion to the single tank and a handful of air units was actually kind of painful to watch. It was just like, it took so long and was so unnecessary. And it was only when that tank and the air units were now killing his other expansion right next to his main that he decided to start acting upon it, just kind of walked over there and wiped his ass with them when that could have happened like 10 minutes ago. So when it came to that salamander attack that just got insta-gibbed after killing some workers, that could have been a really bad point for Pr0nogo, because again, that was such a huge investment at a really critical time in the game, but Keyan really wasn't able to capitalize on that. He wasn't able to, take back the map control that now was offered to him by the air presence being gone, and then he didn't try to secure the middle that lost all of its workers to one salamander and one Valkyrie. And then Pr0nogo was able just to come back and kill it, and it hadn't even rebuilt anything. So I don't know. Like, I felt like that this was one of maybe Keyan's name is really like alluding to the fact he was just hyper tilted from some other game and didn't come into this with a really clear head. Because there's many points in this I'm wondering is like, did the replay desync? Because he's just not really doing anything. But it may have been a combination of really being unfamiliar with a whole bunch of stuff. And I also think it's just like, he may be one of those players that really can't deal with being pressured a lot. And because, like, I can't really beat him. Like, I've played him 1v1, and I won once by turtling with Terran versus Protoss and by filling the map with ion cannons. And I had some success with Sundogs, and I felt like the Sundogs really put him off kilt. But before, it was just like I turtled up. And then I thought he was going to put a lot of pressure on me because I was turtling, but he didn't. And then I started being a little bit annoying with the Sundogs. And to me, it felt like he maybe wasn't really entirely sure how to really respond to that. But pretty much none of the other games are really won against him. So it's more because I don't really commit so much to just like the tickle death that Pr0nogo does. And I try to, I probably play more like Keyan myself, right? So we both end up turtling. It just so happens that, I'm really bad at multitasking. So that allows him to kind of not be under pressure and really emphasize on what he does best. I feel like Pr0nogo just knew, at least in this particular matchup, how to exploit that over and over and over and over. And just death by 1,000 tickles is what it was.